Hi, I'm Veronica Van Wollen, and you're watching Market 1 Minute. We're here today with Richard Carleton, CEO of the Canadian Securities Exchange. Thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Veronica.
So, Richard, we've recently passed that three-quarter mark of 2019. From a listings and financing perspective, what kind of trends are we seeing on the CSE?
Well, we're continuing to see strong listing activity, although it's different in character than 2018. So on a trailing 12-month basis, companies have raised about $5.3 billion through the facilities of the exchange. But it's a different character than the previous year and back into 2017 as well. We saw in the earlier years more money being raised by companies when they first came onto the market. Now, the majority of the money is being raised by companies who are already listed on the exchange, and generally speaking in the U.S. cannabis space. And they're doing it to fund mergers and acquisitions. So what has happened is we're seeing fewer of those large U.S. multi-state operators list on the exchange. The new companies are tending to be acquired by the existing issuer companies.
If we're looking at an investor standpoint, what kind of trends can investors anticipate for the remainder of this year and then leading into 2020?
We've seen a real revival in the gold exploration space, and what began as a trickle of companies that were being funded really at the beginning of this year. As the price of gold has increased, we have seen more and more interest in the sector and more companies being funded as a result. So I think at this point, easily a third of the companies that are coming onto the exchange are specifically in the gold exploration area. One of the additional trends that we're seeing are companies from the international cannabis business looking to join the exchange. So we have a well-deserved reputation in Canada as being the leader for corporate finance in the cannabis space. And the skills that were brought to bear to help finance the industry in Canada and the US are now being brought to bear for companies literally from around the world. So we've seen our first Asian companies within the last couple of months. Thailand is liberalizing their cannabis rules for medical applications. And so we have some companies that are looking to work in that space. We have our first South American companies. We will have companies from the Caribbean basin.
Wow.
We expect to be doing some interesting work with the Jamaican Stock Exchange, specifically in that area. Israel's been very interesting for us. I've been to Israel 4 times in the last 2 years. We've had our team there regularly, speaking with issuers and corporate finance folks in Israel. They tend to be a couple of things. One, cultivators, because yields are high, costs are low in Israel, because apparently it's warmer and sunnier than it is in most parts of Canada. But Israelis also have a wonderful portfolio of intellectual property in the space as well, and probably the largest database of human trial information as well. So we listed our first Israeli cultivation company, Isracan, this week. We expect to see more companies from Israel. We've been doing a lot of work over there, and that effort is now starting to bear some fruit. We think it's tremendously exciting that we've been able to, as I say, attract these issuers from all over the world. And it's really a testament, again, not just to our leadership in the industry, but the support that we've received from the investment dealers, the law firms, and the accounting firms that are also supporting this activity.
That's fantastic to see and very exciting as we expand the cannabis market globally. So lastly, I understand that the CSE is discussing the creation of a senior board for qualified issuers. What can investors expect as a result of this effort?
Yeah, I guess it sounds a little bit like inside baseball, but there will be some tangible benefits for the investment community as we implement this program. But basically, to make a long story short, the requirements for companies listed on the CSE in Canadian securities legislation are intended really to provide a framework for smaller, earlier stage companies. We're now in the happy situation where we have much larger, mature companies with complicated operations and substantial assets that they're bringing to bear. And really what we're looking to do is formalize what we've been doing with these companies on a one-to-one basis to really raise the standards that they are expected to meet, from board size, governance issues, timing to report, quarterly financials and the annual audit statements, for example. What investors should be looking for as we get this program implemented over the next few months, really 3 things. One, we expect that the stocks of the companies that qualify for this senior board will be margin eligible. So that will be interesting as more and more dealers permit clients to hold these stocks in margin accounts. That should also have an important positive impact on liquidity. Secondly, we will be implementing a SPAC program, so Special Purpose Acquisition Corporations, which is an increasingly popular corporate finance vehicle for vending in private U.S. cannabis issuers, for example. And certainly last but not least, we will also be instituting an ETF program, again in consequence of having this senior board. We've had discussions with ETF manufacturers that we will see some interesting products being made available to the investment community as a result of completing this senior board project. Out of the gate, we expect about 70 of the companies will qualify, and we're very excited about the fact that the Canadian Securities Exchange is really growing up along with our issuers.
Absolutely. Those are very exciting advancements to look forward to. Thanks so much for joining us here today, Richard.
Thank you very much, Veronica.